Endless Heist is quickly approaching, and if you need a refresher on any of the general heist mechanics, I have a ton of videos on my channel that will tell you how to do contracts, how to do blueprints, and everything in between. I'll link those all down in the description. Now there are a couple things to keep in mind with the Endless Heist event. Similar to Endless Delve, we're going to have no access to the crafting bench, and we will not have access to boss uniques that cannot be gotten from divination cards. This time around, however, there will be trade available, and divination cards should be plentiful in Heist, so we should have access to some of the boss uniques that come from those divination cards. We will have access to the same set of starter uniques that we did in Endless Delve, so those builds that function off of those specific uniques will work here as well. Now some specifics about how the actual event is going to work is that contracts will be guaranteed and they will be free to run. They can be spammed constantly and you shouldn't run out unless you die over and over and over again, and if you do, there should be some very cheap ones that are available from the vendor. Now blueprints will be dropping later on, but according to the information from the website, they will still require rogues markers to run, which I'm a little upset about, but you know, we should be able to manage, and you should be able to purchase rogues markers from other players if you're playing in Trade League. Do make sure that you grab a loot filter specifically for Heist from filterblade.xyz. It will have the non-relevant items hidden so that you don't waste any of your precious time. Now, as I said previously, this is going to be a trade event, and although there are SSF and hardcore options for those people with wrong opinions, this means that you should be able to get a hold of most uniques and various items like divination card sets, cluster jewels, and more. Now, as with any event, you should kind of give yourself a goal, something to push towards that you want to do for this event. It's going to be 10 days, you're probably not going to play the entire 10 days, and you need to have something that, you know, you actually want to go for. The first thing that I think most people should honestly consider with these events is just actually try to have fun, you know? Like, if your version of fun is pushing for a demi or trying to do something else, then go ahead and do that, but I think a lot of people get caught up and feel like all of the streamers and content creators that are telling you, hey, you gotta push and try to get all this stuff done or you're falling behind or something. I don't really subscribe to that theory. I kind of like to try to have more fun with Path of Exile, and to me, fun is just kind of doing what I want to do. So make sure that you at least think about trying to have fun and maybe don't push yourself so hard for this event. It's the holidays, take a break, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. And if you decide to go with the for fun route, you can play pretty much any build that you want as long as it doesn't require some specific unique that we're not gonna have access to. Now there are going to be those of you who like the idea of racing and want to like push for a demi or something like that. You should really consider thinking about going like solo self-found or hardcore. These are going to be leagues that are going to have significantly less people, specifically the solo self-found hardcore, and you might have an easier time getting some kind of reward in those leagues. The other thing to think about is that if you have an unpopular ascendancy choice, there's going to be less people that you're competing against. So, you know, if you don't want to compete against all of the occultists and such, maybe don't go occultist, because that's probably going to be pretty heavily contested, unless you're a true gamer, of course. And you need to plan to play a lot at the start. Heist is super easy to level in, especially with us just having endless amounts of it. There's very little danger realistically once you know what you're doing, and people are going to get to most likely 100 very, very quickly. And this is even more so in softcore trade, because people are going to be just generating tons of gear and getting everything together and going and going and going. I would say that you want to spend at least a little bit of time getting familiar with Heist and what contracts and stuff that you're, you know, supposed to be running. I have videos on my channel if you want to take a look at this real quick. And for the last group of people, which I'm assuming is probably a lot of you, you're just looking for the MTX. If you're just trying to push for MTX, play one of the few meta builds. Think like Poisonous Concoction Occultist, Toxic Rain Champion, Phys Trapper Saboteur, just something that is going to guarantee you at least level 50 quite easily, as well as maybe being able to push in towards some of the other, you know, chances at different items. Take your time, don't burn out, focus on improving your character and getting as far ahead as you possibly can with your character's power. It's going to make it easier for you not to die, as dying is going to be the worst thing for trying to get higher levels. And mainly stick to the contracts. That is going to be where you're going to be able to get the most speed, you're going to be able to move through contracts quickly. Blueprints are mainly just about getting random chances at gear, and it's probably not the best thing for you to do if you don't know how to do them quickly. Hey there, the YouTube algorithm is endlessly hungry, and if you're enjoying this content, or maybe it's just helping you out, make sure to like the video, and if you want to see more content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that these videos are shown right up in your feed. goofy. Now, I know what most of you are here for, and that's for which build should I play, Big Ducks? Well, I have a pretty decent list of ones that I think will be good, but if nothing in here really works for you, there should be a broad list of builds that you can kind of just get ideas from the Endless Delve PoE.Ninja ladder. The ladder for Endless Delve should be relatively similar, and most of it should function in Endless Heist. So take a look at that. You can choose by hardcore or by softcore to get whatever it is that you need. Now, keep in mind that the main goal of Heist is not to do damage. The only time that you really need to do damage is if you're wanting to level. The goal of Heist is to get in, get the loot, and get out. There's nothing else to it. So a specific kind of build is going to be very good for this kind of content. It's going to be builds that are very tanky, as well as builds that move very quickly through enemies. Think like abilities that allow you to move while you're doing damage. Think like Plague Bearer or Cyclone, and also think about abilities that you're able to throw onto the ground or leave in place and not have to worry about standing there and doing the damage. Think like Toxic Rain, or think like Vortex, think like Spectral Helix, Seismic Trap, Exsanguinate Trap, things like that. Don't underestimate the power of phasing. Phasing is going to be insanely important as Heist, as there's very tight choke points, and you're going to want to be able to just zoom through these enemies and not have to worry about killing a lot of them. Whenever you open a door, there's typically like 500 enemies standing on the other side just waiting to beat you up, and you gotta just be able to zoom right through them. There's about a second, maybe 2 seconds of delay to those enemies moving after the door opens, so if you can just zoom on right through, you're not gonna have to worry about anything. Now, I did say that you can mostly ignore damage, but if you're trying to push up into the very, very high levels, like you're trying to push for a demi, or you're really wanting to get into high 80s, 90s, and such like that, you are going to need to invest into your character enough that you're able to actually, like, you know, do enough damage to kill the enemies in the level 83 heists, so do keep that in mind. There's going to be no quest heists, as well as no unique contracts, so don't assume that you're going to have anything from those either. You also do need to make sure that the build that you choose does function without any bench crafts, and it also works without any of the boss uniques that are not available through a divination card. The ones that are available through a divination card are most likely going to be very, very rare, so do keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the builds. There's going to be a lot of builds on here that you are expecting to see, and maybe one or two that you're not. The first one's going to be Toxic Rain. I've said many times in the past that Toxic Rain is one of the best builds for Heist, and that has not changed pretty much at all. One of the positives of this ability is that you can run it as a bunch of different ascendancies right now, and they all should function quite well for Heist. You can run it as a champion if you're wanting to be tankier. Raider will be a little bit faster. Pathfinder might be able to get some, like, you know, safety and shenanigans going on with flasks if you find something good. Trickster if you really want, like, an ascendancy that no one else is playing and you're hoping to push really high. Or Deadeye if you're looking to do a little bit more damage for some reason and you're also looking for ascendancy that no one is playing. It should be extremely cheap. I'm talking like a Quill Rain and maybe just some random gear, and maybe you could get a little bit better gear with like some fossil crafts or stuff later. We'll probably have more access to fossils in Heist than we will in Delve, to be honest with you. So it should be very, very easy to get some decent damage. And as I said previously, this does do one of the few things that is very good for heisting, and that is doing damage while still moving. And that's mainly through Mirage Archers and the pods from Toxic Rain dropping on the ground. Now, the next build that I want to talk about is Poisonous Concoction. This can be ran as an Occultist or a Pathfinder. Typically, an Occultist is going to be better for clearing, which is what we want. Pathfinder is going to be better for doing single target damage, which is not what we want. Flash charges should be plentiful. There's tons of enemies that were available to kill, and we don't have to worry too much about that. This build does run off of very, very cheap uniques, and it requires rares and a good health flask. That's pretty much it that you need. Another thing is that Plague Bearer is typically the MVP of poison builds, and guess what Plague Bearer allows you to do? Damage while moving, so should be really good. The next build on the list is going to be Cyclone. Now this can be ran in a couple different ways. The first one is going to be cast on crit, and I would suggest that you know what you're doing if you decide to choose this. Be somewhat familiar with how cast on crit works, because it's not going to be super easy to get going. The Fragment of Eternity Dagger that gives you like some crit and some power charge generation should ease the entrance into it pretty substantially, but it is still not a simple build to play for a lot of people. So you may want to choose something else and then transition into this. Think like if you're going to play a Cultist, maybe go like Cold Dot or Poisonous Concoction and then transition into this one later on once you've got the gear and stuff to do it. Alternatively, you can run a physical Cyclone build. Think like a Facebreaker Gladiator, which should be really solid, or like a two-hand physical one like a Staff, or Terminus S should be pretty common in this league, so you could run that as like a champion or a slayer or something like that. You could also run Namahu's Flame as a chieftain. That would be an ascendancy that's probably less desirable than the other ones, so you might be able to push a little bit with that. The main function of this build is going to be that it moves while it does damage, which is very, very good for Heist, because we're looking to get in and get out. It does function off of some pretty cheap gear, except for the cast on crit version. Like I said, know what you're doing before you choose that, or a pair of gloves for face breaker, and not much else. Next build's going to be Cold Dot. Now, this is going to be as an occultist, almost assuredly. It's unfortunately not my favorite version of Cold Dot, but I do think Vortex and Cold Snap is going to be better here. You could try to run with Wintertide Brand, but I don't think Wintertide Brand is going to be as good as that alternative. This build is ridiculously tanky nowadays. It's essentially a straight tank build with a decent amount of damage. Because Trade League is going to be available to us, CI/low life should be much easier to get. The big positive that this build has is that it freezes enemies. Freeze is super powerful when enemies are all like tightly knit and like together, which is going to be most of the time in Heist. It's also very good for leaving the vortexes on the ground or the cold snaps and then running away as it does its damage. You don't need to sit there and, you know, stand and just DPS things when you could be running and gunning. And once again, Cold Dot does very well with cheap rares and uniques. Now, I know this league has been Phys Trap League, and I know you're tired of hearing how good Phys Trap is, but unfortunately it's one of the better builds in the league right now, and it's going to be a pretty solid choice. Although I don't actually feel that this is going to be one of the best choices for this, I do think that it will be good, of course, still. Now, Saboteur is obviously going to be the best. You could try to do some other weird shenanigans with like Ascendant or something like that, but right now when you're playing a trap build, it's pretty much Saboteur. You should know this already, this build can get extremely tanky. I do have a build guide up for this on my channel, you can go and check it out. We should have access to our key uniques here. Tinkerskin shouldn't be super hard to get, and that's going to give you phasing as well as most of your recovery. Cold Iron points will probably be a little expensive, but you should still expect to be able to get them at the high end if you are able to generate enough currency. The build has excellent recovery, very good area-based damage. You're going to be able to throw those traps on the ground or preload the traps so that when enemies walk into them, it just destroys them and then you can keep moving. And also, I would say that if you're going to play this build, focus on getting movement speed and focus much more on movement speed, as the build already has tons of defensive, tons of damage, but it can lack a little bit of movement speed if you don't focus on that. Think like maybe go a shield and try to do like shield charge or something. That might be something that'll work for you. And then the last build is going to be Spectral Helix. Now this can be played as a physical build like a champion, very similar to most of the steel based builds if you want to go check those out, or you can play as an elemental claw raider. I think that the Phys champion is probably going to be the better version of this. It should be very powerful in a very close quarters environment like there is going to be in Heist, as the blades will spin around, hit walls, jump around all over the place, should be pretty good. And you can once again leave the helixes on the ground to do the damage for you. This build can get quite fast. If you want to go even faster, a raider might be able to allow you to do that, but that should be pretty solid. And that is going to be it for the video. Now, Endless Heist should be pretty fun. I don't think as many people are going to play it as maybe they do Endless Delve and such, because historically a lot of people haven't really liked Heist, although I think Heist is actually in a pretty good spot nowadays, one of my favorite league mechanics at the current moment. So let me know what build you decide to play. If you have something else that you've got an idea of, make sure to let me know down in the comments. I try to read through them as much as I can, and try to have fun. If you've never played Heist before, try to just get in, get your feet wet, and see if it's something for you, because later on in another expansion or such in the future, you might be able to get some pretty solid money out of Heist. It is probably one of the biggest looting simulators in the game that there currently is. So remember, boys, if you enjoyed the content or it helped you out, make sure to like this video. If you want to see more videos similar to this in your feed, make sure to subscribe, and remember to stay safe out there in raid class. And I will see you guys in the next video.